Right, so I want to make a video to kind of talk about the biggest dating red flags in women, and I guess some of them would apply to men as well. And I guess just before I start, these are probably not the ones that you hear on a lot of the mainstream kind of dating guys and girls that give advice on YouTube and whatnot. So just getting right into it, I think that these are easily the biggest. I have seven, but I'm sure there's one or two that I forgot and I'll think of after, which usually when I make these kind of videos, I usually forget one or two important things, but I would say that these are really big. And if you have a girl with more than, I'd say, like two or three, maybe even one or two, that a relationship is extremely unlikely to work out with them. But just getting right into it, first I have that they don't own up to past bad dating decisions. And this is a big one because a lot of women and men, but women especially, because society as a whole, white knight for women, in that they'll have dated bad guys, even guys that have abused them, and they won't own up that it was a bad decision. It's generally the whole, I had no way of knowing, it wasn't my fault, victim, victim, victim. They just push the victim button over and over. Um, and what you would want to see is that they would admit to you, I shouldn't have dated this guy. Like, these were the warning signs that were there. I shouldn't have dated him. Um, and rarely will women do that. I would say it's generally a lot of times you'll find ones that'll do it when you press them on it. But if you can find someone that has had this and that admits it to you without you even asking, I would say that'd be ideal. And just because someone has had past bad dating relation or decisions doesn't necessarily mean they're undateable. It just means that um, you should be cautious, I guess. Next one, and this is one that's pretty specific to women in that they've had a lot of sexual partners. I know studies have shown that women who are virgins on their wedding night are 5 times less likely to divorce you than men or women who have had 10 or more in their life. Now, obviously, that's a bit of a drastic example, but I know also women who have had 3 or 4 or less are half as likely to divorce you than women who've had 10 or more. And there's a lot of women out there who have had a lot of sexual partners, so that's one that if she's had a lot, I would not go for it. And like the numbers definitely do not lie when it comes to this. Just look it up. And I know a lot of people will deny this, but I mean, from a biological perspective, it's pretty hard to argue in that um, women weren't designed to have a lot of sexual partners. And the reason why it's a little bit different for men is that women died in childbirth a lot in the past. Obviously, not anymore, but so if you're a tribe, well, you need to be having lots of kids to keep your population numbers stable. So that means having 4 or 5 kids, a couple, and then the woman dies after one or two. Where you have to have one or two more, and then um, that's kind of the difference. Also, women are a lot more emotional when it comes to sex. They tend to bond a lot more. It's a lot easier for a man to have a one night stand and forget about it than a woman. So um, yeah, that's that one. The next one is daddy issues or flat out no dad, and this is one that for the kind of girls that tend to be very sexually promiscuous, they tend to have this overwhelmingly. And the other thing too that I'd mention that I haven't yet, a lot of women will have, if they have one or two of them, they probably have a lot of them. Rarely will you see one of these red flags with just like one or two of them. Generally, if someone has red flags, they have a lot of them. But this one is big because from a biological perspective, if you grow up without a dad, that means that he died from war, most likely, which is going to mean that your society is in grave danger, which means you need to mature a lot faster than is what is normal, which is why you'll see the sexually promiscuous girls tend to be girls with either daddy issues or no dad, because studies have been done showing that women who um, have no dad or like a stepdad, they sexually mature about a year faster than girls that have a biological dad in the house. So, and like I said, the reasoning for that is pretty simple, in that if you don't have a dad for thousands and thousands of years, that meant that he most likely died in war, which means your society or environment is very unstable, which means you need to be able to have kids a lot earlier. So that one's pretty plain and simple. Next one is, this is one that you won't hear pretty well anywhere, and this is actually a very big one, I would say. And I think someone could take it the wrong way too, so make sure you don't do that. But that's if they're very attractive, and this is one for men too that is, I would say, equally as bad, but women, and I would say women actually a little worse, because um, women have a bias in society towards them. But this is definitely one for men too. But as far as women go, um, the reason why you want to be careful if they're very attractive is because they can attract men simply by their looks. They don't need to have any virtues or positive virtues. They can just look pretty, and men are going to be flocking to them. If you're the average woman and you want to attract a high quality man, you have to have high quality virtue. If you're a very good looking woman, you just have to be very good looking. You don't need any virtue. And the problem with that too is that women tend to recognize this, and they tend to manipulate men and even other women, but um, by using their good looks. So that's something that you have to look out for with very attractive women. Is that if they're very good looking, they may simply be using their attractiveness to attract people rather than virtue, which is what you should be looking for. Obviously, attractiveness is important, but virtue is the main thing you should be looking for. And yeah, this is a very big one that I've noticed with people out there, is that very attractive women, and women as a whole, are pretty entitled in modern society, so they, even average women, tend to not develop high quality virtues nowadays, which is why there's all the issues with dating and why the divorce rate is like 40% and whatnot. But this is one to keep in mind, because I think it's something that literally no one talks about and should be talked about more. Next one is if she's a feminist, and this one's if you're more of the red pill mentality, you'll understand, and that's if a woman's a feminist, number one, especially a modern feminist, they'd have absolutely no idea what's going on in modern society. They think that women are oppressed when they're not even close nowadays. It's actually the opposite, and even in the past, it's very overblown. And the other thing about feminists too, well, I mean, feminists generally are women that aren't very attractive, because if they were, they wouldn't be a feminist, but or would be less likely. But this is a big one because, like I said, if you're a feminist, it means you have a very skewed view of reality, because you think that women have this massive bias against them in society, which they don't. The other thing about feminists too is that they're probably going to be less likely to want to have a traditional family. They're going to want to work. They're going to throw their kids in daycare, which is going to, even if they want kids, let alone if they have them. Your kids are not going to have as good of a childhood. You're probably not going to have as good of a relationship either, because they're going to, if you want to control any aspect of the relationship, they're going to think you're a patriarch and all that bullshit. But again, this is one that I think no one talks about either, is that I guess the big thing to mention with this one as well that I haven't talked about is that a lot of women will not flat out say they're a feminist. They'll drop the hints about, like, the traditional feminist talking points, I guess they'll talk about. They won't necessarily flat out tell you they're a feminist. And the other way to tell is that you can say things that completely debunk things that feminists would say. Like, you can talk about, any anti-feminist argument, and if she reacts negatively, then you probably can tell that she is. If she reacts neutrally or with no reaction, then you can probably tell that she's good to go. So that's probably the best way of doing it, because, like I said, rarely will they say they're a feminist. So the best way of doing it is just listen to what they say, and then say things that a feminist would not like. And if they react negatively, you're screwed. If not, you're good. Next one, past trauma or a family history of trauma. And generally they go hand in hand. So, and this isn't necessarily a deal breaker in that if they've had the trauma or the family have had the trauma and they've done the necessary steps to get past it and, therapy or whatever you need to do, I would say they're good. But if they haven't done anything, then I wouldn't get involved because and the thing with this one is that generally if they've had the trauma or the family trauma and they haven't dealt with it, they'll tell you that their childhood and whatnot and their family life is good when in reality it isn't. So this is one that you really need to ask questions with, and this is one for men as well that's very big, because rarely will people flat out tell you that they've had a lot of trauma or their family have had a lot of trauma, because um, people just don't like talking about negative stuff in their past. I guess it's basically plain and simple as far as that goes. So you really need to ask people questions about that stuff, and this is obviously not first date stuff, but stuff you should know sooner rather than later. And last one is if they're trying to impress you or whatever you want to say, simply based off their status or status symbols or status objects or whatever you want to call it. And this is one that's big for men as well. A lot of these are basically exclusive to women, but if they're trying to, women generally, it's they want to impress you because they have a lot of friends or they belong to the cliquey group of all the most popular girls, or they have expensive clothes or stuff like that. And that if they're trying to do that, what they're telling you is that they're not as confident in their personality and or their virtue. They're not confident enough in their virtue or their personality to impress you that way, but they want to do it through artificial stuff. And this is one that I would probably run from as well, because if they're doing that, all they're telling you is that they're probably not good long term, because if they were, they would be trying to impress you based off their virtue, their personality, and whatnot. And if they're doing a little bit of everything, like maybe they're throwing the odd status thing out there, but they have a good personality and they have good virtues in them, then I would be okay with that. But that is about it as far as I have 7. I think these are probably the biggest 7. I tried to think of some other ones, but basically, yeah. This is the first one here. It's a huge one for women. Like I said, women very entitled in modern society, so if they don't own up to past bad dating decisions, what they're telling you is that when something goes wrong in the relationship that's their fault, or with the kids or whatever down the road, they're not going to own up to it, and which means you're going to get blamed for everything. So why would you want that in a partner? This is one that's also exclusive to women. If they've had a lot of sex with a lot of guys, it's not worth it, no matter how good looking she is. Daddy issues is a huge one. Generally, these two will go hand in hand. So, and like I said, a lot of these are going to go hand in hand. You'll be pretty hard set to find that you'll have like 1 or 2 of these in a woman. But yeah, that's a pretty obvious one. This is the one like I talked about. If they're very attractive, they've probably got used to attracting men based off simply on the fact that they're attractive, not based on their virtue or their personality. So that's one to look out for. Feminist means they have a hugely skewed view of society, and that they're very entitled. They're not going to let you control really anything in the relationship. They're probably not going to want kids, and if they do, they're going to throw them in daycare, and the kids are going to have a shitty childhood and whatnot. So that's one that would be a no-brainer for me. I wouldn't, or that would be one that line in the sand for me. I wouldn't. You could give me 1,000,000 feminists, and there wouldn't be one that I would consider dating. The past trauma one is big because, like I said, people generally won't tell you. You're gonna have to get it out of them, and generally they'll say that their childhood was good. They'll say that their family life was good when in reality it wasn't. So that's one that you really need to work on, and if you want to get it out of them. And then status, that's kind of the last one, in that, like I said, if they're just trying to impress you based on their status, then that probably means that their personality and their virtue isn't very good. So that's kind of just to recap the 7 right there. If you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and that's it for now, so stay tuned for more.